Ferguson, the suburb of St. Louis, Missouri. It just seems absolutely incredible that we could have a incident as badly handled on every single level as this one was. Now, the burden of proof for an indictment is very, very low. If a prosecutor decides he wants to have an indictment in all but, I think it was Nate Silver said, 0.01% of cases, all he has to do in front of the grand jury is basically say, I think the evidence exists for us to go to trial with this guy. But yet this particular prosecutor in St. Louis, Ferguson actually, said, no, I'm going to present an entire case there. And of course they came back and said, no, we're not going to indict because this is evidence that should have come out in trial, but not for an indictment. So it was very clear that they never wanted to indict this white police officer for shooting down this unarmed young black teen. And then, of course, we've had 3 nights in a row of violent demonstrations in Ferguson. But in 37 other states, they've had demonstrations where only, I think it was Oakland, turned violent. They've been peaceful. They haven't seen the militarized police force show up as they have in Ferguson. And it's been painful to watch and very, very disturbing.
It's just been very, very badly handled. I mean, it just seems to go on and on in terms of their mismanagement. And they must be so aware that, you have to handle issues like that very sensitively and carefully. And it's just been very badly handled.
There's real questions about the American system and whether it is colorblind and whether there is a sort of equal level of justice that is applied to both black and white. And it seems that the USA is actually kind of moving backwards with regards to racial equality. I mean, there was a Huffington Post YouGov poll of 1,000 adults released this week that kind of found that 62% of African Americans believe Wilson was at fault for the shooting, while only 22% of whites took that position. So there's a real sort of segregation of feeling along colour lines, which is, deeply sort of problematic.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was Robert Hunsaker last week was fantastic in so many respects, but one of the things that I thought he was very, very perceptive on was this issue in relation to, and it feeds into this, it speaks to this a little bit, this issue. I mean, people outside America cannot understand the denigration of Obama, a lot of them. And he was saying, actually, a lot of it is race. He's black, and people do not like that. Many people in America do not like that. So you get all this stuff about him being, a secret Muslim and all the rest of it and all this nonsense. And in a way, you get this Ferguson issue. And as you said, those statistics, Dario, I mean, it's all part of the same thing,
Well, last night on Rachel Maddow's show, there was a guest host, and he basically was discussing New Yorker magazine cartoons, which are the actual covers of them are iconic. And basically 7 years ago, when candidate Obama was running for election, he was accused of giving his wife a terrorist fist bump by Fox News, and the New Yorker cover showed Michelle Obama wearing an Angela, whatever her name was, from the Black Power 1960s.
Angela Davis.
Angela Davis, thank you. Angela Davis afro wig, and giving a fist bump to Obama, who was clad in a turban on his head. Very iconic image, and on the video portion of the podcast we'll put up there so people can actually see it. Well, it turns out that the current edition of the New Yorker has on the cover the St. Louis Gateway Arch, and it's split at the top. One half of the photo is white, one half of the photo is black. And when they approached the artist who'd actually created it, he said that his heart really bleeds for the way in which his city has become so divided. Yeah. Ferguson police continue to react like thugs. Yeah. I mean, you don't need a militarized police force. You don't need this type. I mean, even when you look at Darren Wilson, the cop versus the young lad, they're both the same size. They're 6'4" tall. Yeah. They're as tall and big as I am. Maybe the kid was a little bit heavier than me, and it begs the question: what kind of training does a policeman get that he cannot handle somebody his own size without firing 12 rounds out of his service revolver.
Well, it relates back to the laws that have been in place as well. This stand your ground laws, which relates back to the Trayvon Martin case, and I think there's a refusal from the Republicans to acknowledge the racist element to the system as a whole. Rudy Giuliani was on Channel 4 News the other night saying that there is no racism here. This is an equal playing field, and I don't think that the Republicans, they don't want to admit, or they just hide behind the fact that there isn't a level playing field. And it also relates to the gap between rich and poor. This disproportionately affects ethnic minorities and the way that the police stop and search, of course, that is an unlevel playing field, and the levels of incarceration in America as well. So the history of slavery has created a hierarchy which is, based on race, and social institutions and cultural representations at every level insert these barriers to progress and reinforce the stereotypes of identity that affect how black and ethnic minorities are seen.
Yeah, and Antonio Vargas, who is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who used to write for the Washington Post and New York Times, he came out as undocumented years ago, saying a couple of years ago, basically putting himself at risk. He was brought over to the United States as a child at the age of 12 from the Philippines. And he said in a fairly iconic tweet that got hundreds of thousands of retweets last week, any aggrieved white person who feels that there is discrimination against white America should come and talk with me. I want to have a conversation with you. There is no conversation out there. Fox News and the Republican Party benefit from this because they stoke up white fear within the United States. And that's what all this is about. It's all about the fact that demographically the United States is shifting dramatically. So they will do anything they can politically, from gerrymander congressional districts to suppress the vote, to play with voting machines, anything they can to maintain the Republican white majority in the United States. And it is becoming clearer and clearer that even the dialogue that's happening, and it's not a dialogue, it's a monologue, is so absolutely disgusting that it is beyond the pale.
Yeah, we talked about that this is as bad as it's been, perhaps since the 1970s and the culture wars. But Dennis, you were saying that it hasn't been as bad as this. You've got to go back to the Civil War, really, which is a real sort of tragedy for American culture and society, I think.
Well, it's you go back to the '60s and Bull Connor and Alabama and Mississippi and some of the other. I mean, Mississippi yesterday just got gay marriage, for God's sake. So the fact that people want to remain stuck in the 1960s, that they want to keep African Americans, quote, in their place, that's a message that continues to work its way across.
And yet, I've got to say, I mean, America is such a beacon of fantastic things as well. I mean, you mentioned gay marriage, and that's an incredible thing, I mean, 10, 12 years ago, it was beyond the pale itself, and yet in so many states in America, it is now legal, and it will be legal almost certainly right across America, within, 5 or 8 years. And that's an amazing thing, an amazing turnaround. And in fact, The Economist recently did a whole article on exactly that, a very sort of learned journal, and it was saying this is an incredible change. It was something that they decided to do when they had a load of different other things, and they wanted to do something on gay marriage. I mean, that's an incredible thing.
It is, and there's one thing that's happened this week that did not get a lot of press, but if you are a progressive of any kind, you should be very concerned that Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was back in surgery this week, having the stent in her heart replaced. And Ruth is approaching 80. She is the stalwart liberal voice in the court. And frankly, if anything were to happen to her, I don't think President Obama, with a Republican Congress coming in January, would be able to replace her. They would. I mean, they're not. He's now got a defense secretary he's got to find, an attorney general he's got to find. There are hundreds upon hundreds of open vacancies in the government that they refuse to work on. So we are really headed into a very, very ugly period in the U.S.